If you ever have something on the edge of your document, you see here the green growth that's over there. If you ever have something that touches the edge of your document, you will find that any tool that has the word heal attached to the tool will not do a good job. Because any tool that has the word heal always tries to match the surroundings. Match brightness, match color. And when you get to the edge of your document, there's nothing beyond it to look at. And so even though you're telling it to get rid of this thing that's at the edge of your document, it's going to pick up the color of what was there and try to match it. So let me grab a tool that works a lot like the one that was in Camera Raw that we use to get rid of sensor dust specks. And it's called the Spot Healing Brush. It looks like a Band-Aid with a little selection behind it. I would hate to be an icon designer because there's so many concepts these days. They make people come up with icons for it that it'd have to be a little too creative for me. Okay, with this tool, usually I can get rid of stuff very easily with this, just like sensor dust specks in Camera Raw. Do you see these little holes, like right here and right there? I don't like them. So I'm going to come over here and just get a circle a little bit larger, because remember, it blends into whatever the circle touches. So I need the circle to be touching good stuff and not that thing I'm trying to get rid of. So like that, got rid of it, go over here, boom. All right. So it works a lot like the one in Camera Raw. It's a little more sophisticated than the one in Camera Raw, but it's not usually going to do a good job when you get to the edge of your document, because that's where we have the color on the edge of the document of what we're trying to remove. And this thing's trying to blend into things all the way around the edge, and when it sees the edge of the document, there's no more beyond it to look at, and so it sees the original color of what was there and it brings it in. You see that what I'm talking about? I'll do it to the big thing. You want to cover the whole thing, because if I stop in the middle of something, then what's it going to blend into? Well, whatever's right outside of what I'm applying this to, and it's going to see that color out there. So if I let go right now, a lot of that green is going to be pulled down across this area I'm patching, because it'll try to make a smooth transition across it. And so I need to go all the way around and try not to kiss him. Remember, either gap or blatantly overlap. But you see what happened on the edge. Now we can get around that if we're using anything that's got the word heal attached by switching to a different tool. I should mention that there are lots of different retouching tools. Here's some, and there's another one down here. This one is called the clone stamp tool. All it does is blatantly copy. Just copy this thing and move it over here. Don't do anything special, just move it over here. So with that, whenever you have something that copies from somewhere else, you need to tell it where to copy from. And so to tell it where to copy from, with just about any retouching tool, you hold down the Option key, Alt in Windows, and click. So I just Option clicked. I don't know if you can see where my mouse is right now, but right up there is where I'm going to copy from, right in this area. And then I'm going to apply over here. And what I'm doing, I'll copy from over here, is I'm just trying to isolate the thing I need to remove so it's surrounded with the color that should be there when I'm done. Now, if I'm going to have a problem right where that monkey is because I just can't be precise enough to not come over and kiss the monkey, that sounds funny, then I'm going to have to put a little gap there as well. So I can copy from an area in the surroundings and just put in a little bit of a gap there if I'm thinking that I won't be able to be precise enough to not get my brush to touch it. Now once I've done that, then I can come over here and use something like the Spot Healing Brush, because now when it gets to the edge of the document and it tries to blend in with what's there, I put the stuff over there blatantly that it should blend in with. Does that make sense? Oh, it thought there should be branches there because there's branches above. So let's do the two together. It's one chunk. Hopefully it doesn't think there should be a monkey there. There. Okay. might touch up a few areas, but. So you get the idea that sometimes healing tools will fail you. It's mainly when you come up and kiss something, and that can include kissing the edge of your document. And so if you need to kiss anything, you want to put in some artificial material there to replace there, to make a little gap so you can have a gap between where you're going to put your retouching and the monkey, or between where you're going to put your retouching and the edge of your document, of material that's the right brightness, the right color, so you're just artificially giving it something to blend into. Make sense? But having said that, I'm going to choose undo on this one. Or if I go to the file menu, there's actually a choice called Revert. And Revert means open the image fresh. Get rid of all the changes I've made and reopen it. It would be the same as closing the document and saying don't save, and then reopening it. When you're working on the edge of your document, as we've learned, anything with the word heal attached to it is not going to do a great job unless you supplement it like I did, you help it along. But anything with the words content aware and does not have the word heal attached to it, is going to do fine. And the way we did the panorama thing was content aware technology. So content aware stuff doesn't just blend in with the surroundings. It does something somewhat more sophisticated. So I can go like this, and I'm not going to touch the monkey though, because it might get confused. You might still get confused because I went so close to it. But I selected that, and then do you remember the keyboard shortcut? What was the keyboard shortcut for the fill dialog box? It's Shift, Delete, yeah. And then to click OK in any dialog box, you hit the return or enter key. So return or enter. You see how it did it? And it didn't have a problem where it didn't try to match what used to be there. And so then I click elsewhere, but then be critical of it, because I can see very distinct detail, very recognizable, identifiable shape right here that I also see right there. And that's what I mean by be critical of it. Look for repeats. And if you see any, get in there, Shift, Delete, Return, and then inspect some more. There will be most likely some repeats. It's just a matter of if it's obvious, you need to touch it up. And sometimes it's easier to go over and get the original instead of going where the retouch is, because the retouch looked pretty darn good. And then when you try to get rid of that one little defect, it screws it up a little bit. So you could choose undo and say, no, I'm going to go get this source that it was copying from and retouch it out instead. And just on occasion, that works fine. So I could have gotten rid of these little holes that were in here. Shift, Delete, Return. This same way. So in Photoshop, there's often more than one way. Most of the time, there's more than one way of doing things. And it's a matter of choosing which one you know will be the quickest, you know will take the least mental effort, or whatever you're most comfortable with. And I like working with things I'm comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with a particular feature, it's usually because you don't use it much. And if you just use it over and over again, you'll eventually get used to it, and you can keep it in your general repertoire of techniques. So if I do it one way and you know of another way that you're more comfortable with, do it your way. But if your way fails, it's awfully nice to know of alternatives. So, and that's also where your healing brush doesn't work, and you switch over to content aware. All right, in this case, I love this composition and everything, because Karen's mirroring the building. That's my wife Karen, in case you don't know. But what I don't like is we have an open door on the right side, and I can see light. I can see actually the sky in the distance through the other side of the building, and that makes my eye flick over to that portion. So let me open that. And if you want to see the difference before we actually retouch it out, I have the after, I think. So here's before, there's after. So there I look at the building and Karen. Here I still look at the building and Karen, but my eye can't help but flick over to that bright spot. Also, you'll see other things I retouched out. You'll see a little, I think it's a garbage can that's right near the entrance, and on the left side of the photo, right where the building touches, there's like a electrical box or something. It's a tiny, dark little black thing, but I'm usually pretty picky when it comes to my stuff. So that's what I did. But yeah, question?
Well, since you're making it perfect and everything and going through all that effort, why did you leave that little piece of reflection on the side and
Reflection.
next to the window? Yeah, right next to it, see?
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
I just was probably getting ready to go on the website and just didn't do it. I don't know. It didn't bother me. That's why. It will bother some people, but won't bother others. So pretty much in general, I work on images until I run out of either problems, patience, or time. And that means one of those things popped in. And oftentimes it might be a time thing. So I don't know on this one. But yeah, I could retouch out that other area. What I like to do myself is if I'm working on my own images that are going to be used like to hang up in my house or whatever, or my fine art images that I want to, or images that are going to last for years, meaning I'll keep them on my website, my portfolio, everything else, I end up retouching them, I'll save it, close it, and I want to open it for a while. I'll open it where when I open it next, it feels fresh again. And then oftentimes I end up finding things like that because the initial retouching might have been something that was time consuming or mentally taxing. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. But a month later, when I forgot how mentally taxing it was, then I'll tackle other things. And then eventually what I end up doing is I make prints of what I like small, and I put them up in what we call the gallery. It's the loo, the bathroom, because I spend time in there on occasion and usually sitting where I'm just, for some reason hanging out. And if there's a picture in front of me, I have a Sharpie sitting there, a pen, and I'll mark it up. And if a picture can stay on that wall for, a week or so without getting a mark on it, it's probably done. But otherwise, that's kind of part of my process. We usually live in a mobile home, and our gallery is just this little room where it's just empty walls, and so usually it's just plastered with prints and a Sharpie pen. So I don't know if you guys needed that much detail, but
Gallery spelled I-E or with a Y?
I've never had to spell it, so spelled however you'd like. So anyway, let's just see here if automated tools can work or not. Now the thing about this is the detail that needs to go in there is very specific, isn't it? It's not like clouds or even rocks, where if I put a different rock in that didn't really belong there, it doesn't mean you're going to think it looks wrong. But if it's somebody's face and I put an ear where an eye's supposed to go, you're going to know, right? Same thing here. So usually when it comes to a retouch like this, I wouldn't even try to come in here and use the features we've talked about thus far. But let's do it, because if it happens to work, I'm closing the image, we're moving on. Whoa. Now, you might think that, but if you actually look at it and you make a print of that, it just doesn't quite do it, although it could be a start. You do it just to get it passed, and then you come in and you manually fix the parts that don't look natural. Let's see what it does over here on the other side. Shift, delete, return. It's not terrible, but there are chunks that are obviously wrong. So you could start with something like that and then retouch out what's wrong. But I find too often that I end up later on discovering that something's wrong because my brain is just like, oh, cool. And then I only fix the blatantly wrong. And later on, I just am zoomed out, I glance over, and I'm like, I don't know what it is, but something over there is wrong. So I'm going to undo those things. Now, I should mention about using this edit fill dialog box. Most of the time when I do retouching, I don't want to retouch directly on the same layer that, let me close this. Okay, on the same layer that contains my picture. Because if later on I make a print and I notice something wrong there, I might decide to look better without the retouch in it, or I might want to delete some of it away. And if I've done it directly on the layer that contains the image, then I can't really get it back too easily. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, and that's where I'd usually put my retouching. And one thing is I'm going to see if I can get this to mess up, but you're going to find that frequently going to the edit menu in choosing fill is going to mess up when you have an empty layer active. Let's see if it'll mess up on this one. It's unpredictable, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but we'll see if it gives me a warning dialog. Right now it feels right there. See that? Very common to get that when you have an empty layer that you are working on and it just says it can't do it. There's not enough opaque pixels. Now if I did it to a small thing, let's say this little bright spot there, Shift, Delete, Return, still complains. Well, let's figure out how we could force it to work. How could we force it to work? Well, here's what I'll do. I'm going to duplicate the original layer. There are many different ways of duplicating, but what I'm going to do is what I do most frequently, which is a keyboard shortcut. But if you ever want to duplicate a layer and use the keyboard to do so, you can jump it to a new layer. I say it that way because then you know the keyboard shortcut for it. To jump it to a new layer, that means you want to type Command J. Control J in Windows. Now if you don't remember that because you hate keyboard shortcuts, you can click on the layer and drag it down to the new layer icon. That's another way of duplicating it. There's about 4 ways of duplicating a layer. But I'm just mentioning Command J if you're going to end up duplicating layers a lot. It's nice to know that a keyboard shortcut does exist. Now I'm going to select that area. And now the edit fill will work. It always works when you have a layer that's completely full of the image. And now this is what I think is funny. I could choose select inverse to get the opposite and hit delete. And now I have exactly what I wanted before. Meaning look at my layers panel. I have just a little piece now. Because after it was done doing its work, I said select everything else. I hit the delete key, which threw away that part of the picture. So if I were to do that, I'll choose undo here a few times. If I had the layer underneath turned off, this is what it would have looked like. Select inverse. I had chosen undo until I was back to the point I was at before. And delete. It just deleted all those surroundings. Deselect. But usually the layer, the original picture is underneath, so you don't see all the stuff go away. But I end up having it on its own layer where it's just the little part of the retouching. And so it's the way that I force the edit fill thing to work when it complains. Now when you have a complex document, let's say I have a really complicated one that's got 30 layers in it. It might be that I can't just duplicate a layer and get what I need because the material I'm trying to retouch is made out of like 10 layers. And so I can't just duplicate one layer. And if that's the case, there is a trick. Let me do something to make this be created out of more than one layer. And I'm just going to make it ugly. Okay, there's more than one layer. This is in one layer. You see that's in a layer. The layer below, this is what's in it. The layer below, this is what's in it. Okay. You have a couple ways that you can get all of this material onto one layer. And what it is there is a choice in here that's called Merge Visible. Merge Visible. And if I choose Merge Visible, watch what happens in my Layers panel. You see layers combine? But there's a trick. If you add the Option key, Alt and Windows. I don't know if you remember or not, but yesterday we used the Option key for a few things. And whenever we used it, if we were dragging something, it dragged a duplicate of it. Do you remember we had a layer style called Drop Shadow? We held the Option key, drag it to another layer, and it moved a duplicate of it. Well, right now, if I hold down the Option key when I choose Merge Visible, watch my Layers panel. It did it to a duplicate of the layers. So it left the originals, and it took duplicates and merged them. So that's what I'd have to do right there if I had a complex document that now I wanted to retouch out the stuff that's on those other layers. and get the Shift-Delete thing to work, I would need to hold down the Option key, Alt and Windows, when I choose Merge Visible. And that means merge a duplicate of those layers, keeping the originals.